Welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? The show that brings you answers to many of the questions that you may have, but with no one to ask. Do You Ever Wonder is hosted by Mike Haltman, CEO of Hallmark Abstract Service, who, like you, has always been deeply curious about a wide variety of topics. Each week, Mike will be speaking with guests who are leaders in their field and who have inspirational stories to tell. So now, sit back and enjoy the show.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Do You Ever Wonder? I got to tell you that given a lot of different issues, I don't think we could have a more topical guest than we have today. This is going to be an episode about history. It's going to be an episode about current events as well. So back in the 70s and 80s, the world was a very dangerous place. Today, in 2023, the world is a dangerous place and feels as if it's on fire. So with that said, I would like to welcome Jack Barsky. Jack is a former KGB agent, born in East Germany. He spent 10 years in the 70s and 80s living in the US under the radar. He was an elite group, a member of an elite group of Soviet spies. I believe there were only 10 people who were doing what Jack was doing. He was a risk taker. He was someone who in the US who had freedom of movement, and at that time, a spotter for the Soviet Union for potential recruits to the movement. So ultimately, people don't typically leave the KGB the same way people don't typically leave the mob, except one way. But Jack left a different way. And he left for one large reason, the love of his daughter, and it's a fantastic story. He's now a U.S. citizen. He was the subject of a 60 Minutes episode. He actually, I believe, narrates the Agent, which is a 12 episode series that you can listen to. I listened to many of the episodes, and it was fantastic. So he's got an unbelievable story. He's a fantastic guest. I've seen him on Fox News, and welcome, Jack.
Well, this was arguably at least in the top 3 of introductions that I've ever heard.
Well, fantastic. Well, you know what? You deserve it.
Thank you.
You have a fantastic story to tell, and I listened to another podcast you did, and you said, I have a 60-second elevator speech, and then you gave it. So if you're interested, if you'd like to give a little bit of background, that would be fantastic.
Well, I really have nothing much to add other than the bottom line that today, as we speak here, I am intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually 100% American. So, obviously I cannot deny that I have genes that say half German, a quarter Polish, and a quarter Czech. But with regard to how I have evolved, I don't want to go back to live in Germany. Even you would have to pay me a lot of money to do that.
You know what? I don't listen. I have in my background, if I ever did one of those DNA tests, I have a lot of Eastern European in my blood as well, but I too am 100% American. And, as an interesting lead into our conversation this morning, I was thinking. So I've always been watched politics, opined on politics. I wrote a blog on politics, and this morning, given everything that's going on, I was so mad and revved up that I started doing research into how to run for office, because I don't know that that's going to accomplish anything, but you get the feeling that when you sit in the back, you're just somebody who preaches to the choir, isn't actually trying to affect change. That maybe there's more you can do, and I would like more than anything to leave some kind of a legacy. I mean, what's your opinion on what somebody who runs for office could actually accomplish, assuming they were independent?
I just started reading something written by, I forgot his first name, by a fellow named Bastiat, a French philosopher. It's called The Law. I recommend this to anybody who likes thinking about what's going on. Bottom line is, he could have been one of the founders. When we're talking about inalienable rights, they're not given to us by the law. All the law can do is take them away. And so if you get elected, you will participate in the taking away. Now, some of the taking away is absolutely necessary. Okay, we're talking about defense. We're talking about securing the borders. We're talking about transportation and stuff like this. This is national, that provides a service for all. But when you look at what government does, and this is not a political statement, it happens under Republicans as well as under Democrats. All they ever do is they tax you and then they give it to somebody else.
100%. So, it's funny you said this is not a political statement because, one of the things that I would like to say is that this discussion we're having is politically agnostic, although I have a feeling that anyone listening to it, if they listen through to the end, might have a feeling that it may not be politically agnostic. But a discussion with you couldn't be complete. In the current day Russia, is the KGB still a factor?
Well, not the KGB. We're talking about the KGB when it was dissolved. It became three, actually two organizations. One is called the SVR, which was supposed to do espionage, and the other one is the FSB, which was supposed to be like the FBI of Russia. But today the FSB is significantly bigger, more powerful. That's the main instrument for Putin to keep sort of like the KGB, make sure that the dissidents don't go overboard, and keep everybody in line and do espionage, counter-espionage. The SVR is doing a little bit of espionage, and then we have the GRU, which never changed. It was its military intelligence, and it just like it didn't change. And with regard to, and the people who know this field better than I do, with regard to which one is the most competent, it's clearly the military intelligence. And when you're looking at the assassination attempts, that they have all been executed by the GRU in most recent history.
Interesting. So I saw today that Putin is going to be running for president again in 2024. I'm sure that's not a surprise to you. And
Now, the interesting thing, and that needs to be emphasized. Vladimir Putin gets the votes. There's no fraud in the elections, and it has to be said because when the war in Ukraine started, and as it continues, there's a whole lot of people in the media that say, well, eventually the Russian people will just like have enough of this nonsense, and somehow there will be either a coup d'etat or the Russians will just rebel and overthrow Vladimir Putin. It ain't gonna happen. He has been a master manipulator, the same way I was manipulated and brainwashed growing up. And if you get the same message over and over and over again, and there is some kernel of truth sometimes in the messages, such as Ukraine has Nazis, always had for a long time, and there's still Nazis active in party politics in Ukraine. So you got this kernel of truth, and that makes the big lie much more palatable. So let him run. He's going to win.
I once met with the chief rabbi of the Ukraine, and it's not great being Jewish in a lot of places these days, but
Oh God, yeah.
Ukraine certainly was one of them. So, a discussion with you wouldn't be complete without talking about Ukraine. So, what do you think? What do you think Putin's mindset is now?
Well, he can't give up. he cannot show signs of weakness. You know, you see what he did with I we still don't really know what happened with Prigozhin and you know the head of the Wagner group and how he was such an idiot to enter a plane that had explosives. I can't believe that. There's something not right. But anyway, and Putin will keep on marching, and he's now recruiting soldiers from other countries, third world countries, because he's running out of people that can fight, but Ukraine is running out of people that can fight even faster. So this is either going to get negotiated in some way, or Russia will win.
So if Russia wins, you know, the big discussion on Capitol Hill is if Russia wins, then his next goal will be to invade a NATO country.
Well, I think that's scaremongering. I think Vladimir is not suicidal because, and he's not stupid, and he knows if he invades NATO, he will be dead.
Of course, I agree with you 100%. But, you know, Russia has the nukes. Russia has a lot of weapons. We're supplying a lot of weapons to Ukraine. How far is he willing to go?
Again, a purposeful launch of a nuke, I think that's not going to happen. What I'm worried about is an accidental launch. And as you probably know, during the Cold War, there were 3 instances where we got really, really close.
Wasn't it a fact that the guy with his finger on the button didn't need to get approval from the Kremlin to do that? Or am
Well, you know more than I do, but so I.
I don't think so.
Yeah, but I'm never gonna state something that is not at least an educated guess, and this one I can't guess. I'm sorry. But the other thing I'm worried about is the state that nuclear arsenal the Russians have is in. You know, I spent 2 years in Moscow, and with regard to things that the Soviets produced, and very much today the Russians produce, it's all subpar quality. They and that has a lot to do with how the Soviet Union got industrialized by force by Stalin, and it wasn't an organic development like in the West. And so we have still this peasant mentality, and there's a lot of sloppiness, and God forbid something blows up by accident by itself.
And who do we even know where they all are and in what country and in whose possession?
Well, when you say what country, if they're secreted away, we probably don't know where they all are. I believe I'm pretty sure that we know where they are with regard to the country of Russia. But I can't think about this because every time I think about it, I want to jump in a lake and not breathe anymore.
That's where that's the well, I got mad. That's the state I was in this morning. I just got mad. But I was talking to somebody this morning who is like depressed, very depressed about the state of things.
Yeah.
So now we hear a lot of noise on media about the what Israel is doing in Gaza. Now in Ukraine, I believe, and correct me if you know, the indiscriminate killing, the torture, the rape. I mean, I think has been fairly rampant.
In Ukraine itself?
Russians perpetrating on Ukrainians.
Oh. Yes and no. You understand that some of it is absolutely true, but we are talking about a war,
Right.
and when there's a war, everything is a weapon, and that includes words, it includes communication. So whatever comes out of either side, you have to take with a grain of salt because they're using it partially to communicate to their own people and partially to communicate to the world. And so lies and more lies.
Right. I mean, as an American Jew, I know that the video of what was done to the Israelis is pretty much a documented fact. What has happened in Gaza, war, there was an old saying I'm sure you're familiar with, war is hell. And can you imagine if World War II, we had said, you can't bomb here, you can't bomb there, there's too much collateral damage. I mean, it's like, I don't get it. I don't understand what's happened.
Oh, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, when the Allied marched into Germany, particularly during the bombing of cities like Dresden and Berlin and so forth, there's a lot of civilians that died. And guess what? It was necessary. Was it necessary to explode the nuke in Hiroshima and Nagasaki? You can talk about it, but it had an impact. It ended that war.
Into the war. And the prognostication is that had we had to have invaded Japan, then the damage and the death would have been even greater.
Yeah,
So
it's so hard to argue when I'm sorry, I shouldn't touch that camera. So it's so gut wrenching when you have to make a decision between the lesser and the greater evil, and you have no choice to come up even with a small good as an alternative.
you know what? That's why leadership is difficult,
Oh yeah.
but but it does take leaders. I don't know that the world is stuffed full with leaders today.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Western world in particular, there are leaders that are more effective amongst our enemies.
Yes.
I
Yes,
mean,
sir.
the Ayatollah is a great leader for his movement.
Yes. Oh, that's true. Yeah, 100%. So now, you as a former KGB agent who grew up in East Germany, who knows Russia, uh, for you back in those days, or for your society back in those days, the government suppression of political opposition was pretty much the rule,
Yeah,
right?
what opposition?
Right. Exactly.
It
Exactly.
was mostly underground, and the moment it appeared up above ground,
Killed.
it was dealt with. And it was in East Germany, it was dealt um, with reasonable elegance. I never had a clue, not a hint. I didn't know anybody who was victimized by the regime or who knew somebody else who was victimized by the regime. Uh, Partially because they didn't feel like talking about it, and partially because nobody really knew. And I grew up in a bubble. I was I was an excellent student. I was number one, and so I had no reason to do research because I I was going to join the elite, and that was very the ruling elite. It was very appealing to somebody as arrogant and proud as I was when I was young. Like yeah.
It's, a, it's an interesting basis of communism, I believe, and I'm not 100% familiar with it, but you as an elite live a much different life than the rank and file. So
Well, it wasn't that much different. I still had to go to the same cafeteria, but in some sense it was different because I got a scholarship that paid me as much money as a student in the last 2 years as I got when I started my job as an assistant professor. I was a rich student, okay? Um,
so going back to the political oppression, or the suppression of political opposition, do you see any parallels to what has, and we don't know for a fact, but do you see any parallels from back then to what goes on today?
as long as we don't call it communism and Marxism, because that's a misapplied label. And
Your photo's off again.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
It's a table is moving, and so I have to, and when I'm moving, it sends signals. Like anyway, so I'm gonna try to be more stable. Oh, here we go again. What's going on?
But though it's a great looking parrot. Well,
So,
you
uh,
better look.
so what we're talking about here is, and I just want to bring that in. What we have in the West is a movement towards collectivism, and the collective needs to be protected, and it will operate in a similar way as the communist regime did. We're not there yet. It's moving in that direction more slowly. We still have the rule of law, even though it's been broken here and there. But there's still some elements of the Constitution that have survived, and they're still fighting in Congress based on some rules. But I see the degradation of all of this, and do we actually honor the Constitution anymore?
You know what? It seems to me that we, the United States, are on a slippery slope. And
Well, but Western Europe is for the most part ahead of us on that slope.
yes, it is. So what happens to the civilized world?
Well, yeah, and it 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 requires a miracle, in my view, to reverse that, particularly when the big companies and big tech is part of the collective and sits at the very top of the collective,
100.
as opposed to just a hierarchical party.
Well, I mean, if you look at the suppression of political opposition, you have to look no further than tech. You know,
Yeah.
what was done, suppressing different things. Yeah, it's a slippery slope, and we will see what happens. But so also coming from the former Soviet Union, East Germany, you're very familiar with government use of propaganda or
Oh,
propaganda in general.
oh, you bet. I mean, first of all, we were pretty much isolated in terms of getting information. Uh, we were close enough to West Germany to actually receive West German television, but it required, in most places, a pretty sizable antenna on your roof. And
And to cut people off.
yeah, that was a signal that you were potentially a dissident, and the Stasi moved in, and even members of the communist youth organizations would climb on the roof and remove the antenna. And what we could receive was radio stations. They didn't really uh, interfere with the reception of radio stations, but you know, at least us young people, we didn't listen to commentary. We just listened to the music, right? Um, so we were pretty much isolated, and so whatever we were taught about West Germany and the United States, we sort of knew that there was a higher standard of living, but the propaganda was because the Americans and the West Germans, they stole everything from the third world, and it was our task to, uh, you know, help the poor suppressed folks in the third world to free themselves from imperialism. I mean, and it was constant, and I tell you, in hindsight, the East German rulers after World War II systematically set up the next generation, such as us, to believe in all the lies. And because the propaganda and the brainwashing started in kindergarten and it went on and on, and there was fundamentally no organization that you could join, even though you could be a member of a paramilitary organization where you learn how to parachute and do target shooting. But there you get propaganda. The young pioneers, the German American, German Russian Soviet Friendship Society, the unions, the media. Now, there's one thing when it came to the newspapers, most of us would not read the first page because we knew that was nonsense. But the useful propaganda was hidden someplace else. I mean, even in the movies, in in theater, in the arts, it was all there was all an element of communist propaganda in there, and some of that stuff was really good.
Well, let me ask you this. So you talk about indoctrination of youth from a young age. I don't know if you watched the testimony of the three most elite college presidents in front of Congress. I don't know if you
Oh
saw.
yeah, I mean, did they play dumb or are they that dumb?
I think they were very well schooled by their attorneys, but the point is, what are we teaching our youth? What is the indoctrination? I'm not a conspiracy theorist, although my kids will tell you that I am. But what is the indoctrination of our kids? I was talking about propaganda, and there's a term I use, and I explained what I meant by it on a Facebook post, but useful idiots. So, what I call those are people who are willing, susceptible tools
Yeah,
of puppet masters who want them to agree with, fight for, and execute uh, whatever whatever message it is that they're sending. And I think you can look no further than the anti-Semitic marches that are going through the streets where, I saw a survey that was done where, 60% of them didn't know what they were talking about, didn't know.
that's right. And unfortunately, that the roots for that go quite a bit back. Let me tell you, my first impression when I came to the U.S. and I had an idea of the uh, education system in the U.S. at that time, that was in the late 70s, early 80s, I was scratching my head because one thing that I had never been subject to in the however many years I had 12 plus 6 is 18 years of education in East Germany. I never knew that there was such a thing as a multiple choice or true and false test. The focus of even in that at that time on learning facts was disturbing to me because even then thinking wasn't taught. We were taught to think.
Critical thinking.
Other than the final year of my high school, the I have a copy of the curriculum. Half of it was science and math, and there were no electives. So the only problem was that when it came to communist propaganda, we were led to go the wrong way, and we became useful idiots. And by the way, that's a term that was coined by Lenin, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Hmm?
it's a disparaging term, but I think it's a very descriptive term. You know,
Yes. And let me just finish this up. Um, and so history, Americans don't know history, and Americans don't really know geography. Americans don't know much about the world, how it was, and how it evolved to come to this state, and who else is living on this in this place. So with that kind of ignorance and the inability to think on your own, you got a bunch of targets that could be useful idiots, lots of them, and that's the scary part.
that's the scary part. So, the 30s wasn't that far away. It's not that far off. And when you see some of the things that are taking place in the streets, and it's a mob mentality. It's like, I was on 42nd Street. There was a pro-Palestinian slash Hamas march that I had to walk through. But just looking at the composition of the marchers, I think people don't really understand that, extremism, if it came here, is here, would kill them. They are not. they are not immune from
Yeah,
the
yeah, they're expendable. They're absolutely
100%.
expendable. That's why you use the term useful idiots. You know, when they have they've done what they needed to do for our cause, to
You're
heck with them.
done. Yeah, I mean, it just, and that's why this morning when I woke up angry and frustrated and mad, I was like, there's got to be people who can be leaders, who can not be bought by the system and actually try and affect good change. And
Yeah, and I think you can do this. There needs to start at the grassroots. You can't make, overnight turn a switch and make a mass movement out of it. One comment: these marchers, uh, there are at least half of them are women, maybe even more. And guess what would happen to these women if these radicals were ever to take over here?
raped and killed.
Yeah,
I mean, I saw a homosexual group, chanting for Palestinians and Hamas. I mean, I don't know. Maybe they haven't seen the videos of homosexuals being thrown off buildings in Middle Eastern countries, but I think that's the ignorance you talk about. People
yeah,
are so keen to fall into a cause, fall into a mass group of groupthink that they really don't know, and that I
yeah.
don't know whose fault that is.
Yeah, well, and then you're in an echo chamber, and you hear, and you get reinforcement of your biases already, and the a lot of people have a problem with changing their mind, that because that creates psychological imbalance. So you stick with what you know. I have evidence of that when I went back to Germany and reconnected with my old friends who were brainwashed just the same I was. They at least still pink. Okay, pink maybe, and they will almost, not all of them, but a lot of them will say, no, we had a real good cause. We just had the wrong leaders. That's rationalizing. So
Right.
because you see, the thing is, when that wall came down, my friends were like, everybody was surprised, and it felt to them like being hit over the head with a 2x4. I had the luxury of very slow decontamination, and that didn't hurt at all. I admit that I was an idiot, but thank God I didn't become a useful idiot.
Right. No, 100%. But you talk about, can people's minds be changed? A friend of mine went to a an event. Matt Taibbi. I don't know if you know
Oh,
the name.
I know of him. I've heard of, uh, I I remember him being pretty hard left, but he's a rational thinker.
Yes. So they went to an event where he was the speaker, and she went with two fairly liberal people. And by the time Matt Taibbi had spoken, the entire group of mostly liberal people were outraged by what he was talking about. Freedom of freedom. The
Yeah,
fact that freedom is not what it once was, and that's what needs to be done. Is that people, there are certain loud voices, and then there are voices like mine, and the loud voices, which are, leading to marches in the streets and leading to a whole bunch of things. I don't know how you become one of those loud voices.
and
Well, I'm gonna.
and
Oh, go ahead.
and yelling at each other is not going to do anything either. You
No.
know, as I said, grassroots, and this kind of communication has to be done in love. You can't do like a confrontational argument. As logical as it may be, it will generate resistance. I'm with Dale Carnegie, who says the only good argument is the one that you can avoid, because you can't win it. but there's ways to get around this direct argument, and you change minds. Like for instance, if you're a storekeeper and you have bought into some of the things that are false, and all of a sudden your store gets invaded, and your government isn't helping out. So I think that would make you change your mind.
I think so too. But so the last thing I want to ask you about, I know that the Soviet Union and now Russia leads through strength. Ronald Reagan said peace through strength.
Yeah.
Is that possible? I mean, what kind of a leader will it take to get us to peace through strength?
Well, it has to be a really good communicator like Ronald Reagan, and it has to be somebody who is not afraid of the consequences of their own decision. Peace through weakness has never worked in history. I just like Chamberlain when he yielded part of Czechoslovakia to Germany. That just encouraged Hitler to go any further. The weakness, you got evil people in this world. You got evil leaders who will take any opportunity to grab more power. You can't appease them.
First, a perfect example would be Putin taking Crimea,
Yeah,
zero resistance.
yeah.
And what did it
And and
now?
Barack Obama threatening Putin not to step over the line, and then he didn't do a thing. So what?
You know what? It's like on the playground. If the only thing the bully's going to understand is a punch in the mouth.
Yeah, I learned that in corporate America. One time I was in management, and there was this one guy, a big guy, and he was not very bright, but he had managed to get a position that was higher than mine in the hierarchy. And he came and he just came on pretty strong, and I told him in his face, "Don't talk to me like that." And guess what?
He didn't.
He 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 never repeated it, and he was, from that point on, he was very nice.
Yeah, no, listen, people, and you know this is better than I do, people push as far as they can go, and when you get pushed back, then you realize that you've reached a line, and then you stop. But hopefully we'll have someone figure all that out so that America stays what America has always been. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's nowadays it's subject to praying for some divine
You know what?
intervention.
I used to be a trader, and used to say that the hope and pray trade really never tended to work out. But maybe this time will be different. Another phrase that is used always. But Jack, I got to tell you, this was fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on and speaking, and hopefully we figured something out today. But I'm not sure that we did.
No, we um but it's good to have this kind of a conversation, because you on a daily basis, you can't. I have this conversation with friends of mine, but it can't take over, because at that point, I still have a living to make. I have a 13-year-old daughter to take care of, so I can't like spend the rest or the majority of my time whining and complaining.
That's
And
true. I
and,
agree. I agree, but
and
it is good, like with your books, to sometimes have an outlet to vent a little bit.
yeah, sure. And I still am grateful for what I have based on where I came from. And a lot of people who came from countries like mine, from where countries where this collectivism was taken to an extreme, are still extremely grateful for what we have here in this country.
You know what? Listen, no matter what, we are, in my opinion, the greatest country on earth. So
I agree, and American exceptionalism is not bragging; it's a matter of fact. The American the way the United States was formed is in my view the only way to combat the intrinsic tendency towards evil within man. And I'm not talking about every individual, but man as a species, because when you look at history, we have been ruled by evil.
Despots. Yes,
Yep.
agreed. Well, hopefully, sometime in the not too distant future, Jack, you will come back on and we can talk about where we were and how great things are.
Yeah, as long as you don't get canceled.
God forbid.
Yeah, we really haven't. We don't. I stay away from personal attacks. Occasionally, you mention somebody, but you know that when you criticize one particular step, that doesn't make you can't draw the conclusion that the person that took that step is no good. Period. So you got to be careful.
Most people, most everyone, although with exclusions, have some level of goodness in them.
Uh, I do agree. I do agree. There is raw evil, and unfortunately, and this is maybe one more statement that is near and dear to me. When you look at hierarchies, whether that be in an organization, in a company, or in a state, the tendency is for the most aggressive and very often the most evil to wind up at the top.
Yep. No, that's for sure. That's for sure. Well, Jack, again, thank you very much, and I hope to speak to you soon. A very happy holidays and wishes for a very happy, healthy, prosperous, and safe 2024.
Well, same to you. And as you may know, I'm a Christian, and we had a pastor the other day who explained the meaning of shalom. So I would like to say shalom to you.
Thank you very much.
And lastly, this is just a comment. You need to take that out, but this is a great test for what I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm going to be on Jordan Peterson.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
All right, well, listen, I feel extremely fortunate to have somebody of your stature here talking to me.
Well, thank you. And that was that was very demanding, but very fulfilling talk. Thank you. I appreciate it.
My pleasure, and I will see you soon.
All right. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Do You Ever Wonder? And we hope that you enjoyed the show. Next week, we will have another terrific guest telling their story. And if there are any specific topics you'd like to hear more about, please don't hesitate to let us know. Our curiosity, like yours, knows no bounds. Please subscribe and like and share this episode on your social media. See you next week.